Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. New York Times best-selling author Paul Kengor is out with a new book based on never-before-published files in Soviet archives. In Dupes, he writes about liberals who he feels have unwittingly aided America's most dangerous foreign adversaries from the Cold War to today. Kengor is a respected presidential historian and political science professor who heads up the Center for Vision and Values at Grove City College in Pennsylvania. He has also written several books about Ronald Reagan, including The Crusade and God and Ronald Reagan. Welcome to Newsmax TV, Professor Kengor.
Thank you, Kathleen, and it's good to be with you. Newsmax is one of the few sources that's willing to ask these hard, politically incorrect questions.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to have you on, and congratulations on your book.
Well, thank you.
Well, first, tell us exactly who are the dupes, and how is it that they've been duped?
I got the idea from looking at Comintern archives. That's the Communist International, the Soviet Comintern. Comintern archives on CPUSA, Communist Party USA, which again is one of those groups, CPUSA, that only groups like sources like Newsmax are willing to look at. But I went in there and I started looking in these archives beginning in 1919, when the Comintern was founded in Moscow, March of 1919. And when the Communist Party was founded in America, in Chicago, in September of 1919. And I found in there not just jaw-dropping statements and contacts and correspondence between American communists and Soviet communists, but the very deliberate, very cynical, very shrewd manipulation and targeting of American liberals and progressives to be used by the communists. With always very clear instructions. Don't let them know that you're communist. Don't tell them that you're a member of the Communist Party. Don't ever let them know that you write for the Daily Worker or People's Weekly World or Masses and Mainstream. And again and again and again, especially with, among others, academics, social justice, religious left, progressive pastors, they had amazing success manipulating, duping, hoodwinking, fooling, deceiving these people, and through that, these people became unwitting participants. They helped aid and abet these enemies of America. Now, the fact that they're dupes means that they're not traitors. They're not guilty of treason. They didn't deliberately try to work against American interests. They didn't realize that they were being used. And that's really the nature of a dupe.
Now, Paul, who were these people, or who are these people? Who are the greatest dupes in American history, in your view?
Wow. Oh, boy, where to even start on that one? There's John Dewey, the really probably closest thing to a founder in American public education. I was astonished, just floored, Kathleen, to find John Dewey, his works, which are still to this day seminal readings in the core curriculum of American departments of education, especially Columbia Teachers College, which among its distinguished alumni includes people like Bill Ayers in the 1980s, who actually got his PhD there in education. But I was astonished to find that these books by Dewey, which are Bibles in our education departments, were being rapidly translated into Russian by the Bolsheviks in the very first years of the Bolshevik Revolution. And they loved Dewey so much, the Bolsheviks did, that they actually invited him over to the Soviet Union, where they manipulated him in this remarkable Potemkin village tour of the Soviet Union, where Dewey bought every bit of grotesque, ridiculous, exaggerated Soviet propaganda and agitprop, hook, line, and sinker. Came back, repeated it in the pages of the New Republic in a six-part series of articles. So Dewey's one. The Hollywood people, Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Hollywood writers, screenwriters, politicians, Ted Kennedy.
Speaking of Kennedy, now I know that in the book that you wrote that the late Senator Kennedy approached the Soviet leadership to undermine not one, but two American presidents. Talk to us about your evidence and what the backstory is here.
Yeah, well, in the book, I have the actual documents from the KGB archives. It's It's a remarkable 6-page document, May 1983. And I mean, just imagine, Kathleen, looking at these documents, and you look at page 1, and I've got it here right in front of me right now. And the first line says special importance, so you know you're dealing with a highly classified document. And by the way, this document, which I published in the book, I understand has since been resealed in Russian archives. We have it in Russian and in English. And then the next line says Committee on State Security of the USSR, which means KGB. Then the date, and then the subject head says, regarding Senator Kennedy's request to the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Yuri Andropov. So, I mean, right then and there, I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not funny, but right then and there, this grabs your attention. And what the document basically says is that Senator Kennedy is very worried about worsening U.S.-Soviet relations, and he blames this not on the Soviets, not on this Stalinist leader Yuri Andropov. In fact, the letter says that Kennedy is, quote-unquote, very impressed with Andropov. But Kennedy blames it on, as the letter puts it, Reagan's belligerence, that it's Reagan's defense policies that are a threat here, that Reagan's defense policies need to be countered. Okay, and also here, too, the other danger, and this is the entire context of the document, is that Reagan is up for re-election next year, and Reagan is flying high. In fact, this is really quite interesting, Kathleen. It's the only place I've ever seen where Ted Kennedy and the Soviets acknowledged that Reaganomics was working, so in this private letter. So given that Reaganomics is working, this is bad.
Professor, that's a fascinating story. Can you tell us how President Obama fits into this? Because you write about new evidence that one of the president's mentors had extensive communist ties.
Yeah, I spent about 3 years on that one, Frank Marshall Davis. And again, a credit to Newsmax for being one of the only sources willing to even look at this. In fact, most of the biggies on talk radio won't even talk about this. Obama had a mentor named Frank Marshall Davis. Writes about him in Dreams from My Father. Gave him advice on life, on college, on women, on race, all these different things. And this is right before, as Obama says in Dreams from My Father, he leaves for Occidental College, where he goes and hangs out with Marxist professors, attends socialist conferences. Well, I had heard when I was writing this book that Davis was a mentor to Obama, and I heard some people among conservatives say that he was a communist. Well, I've got all these documents, all these House committee reports, all these Senate Judiciary Committee reports. By the way, most of these were run by Democrats. And I just look in the index, and I find Frank Marshall Davis, who was called to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee in 1956 on his communist associations. And by the way, he pled the Fifth Amendment. The next year, the Senate Judiciary said that he was an actual identified member of the Communist Party, which I found. I got all of Davis's columns for the Honolulu Record, the Communist Party USA weekly, for 1949 and 1950. Very, very clear the guy was a communist. He despised Harry Truman and the Democrats and anybody else who countered Stalin. Make a long story short, Kathleen, right before the book went to press, I got, through a FOIA request that was filed by a colleague, I actually got Davis's 600-page FBI file. In fact, if you look at the website for this book, for Dupes, I reprint there 2 or 3 of the documents from that 600-page file. In the actual book, we republish about 12 documents. In fact, one of the pages in the book, it's on page 507, actually lists Frank Marshall Davis, Obama's mentor, actually lists the FBI file page that has Davis's Communist Party card number, which was 47544.
Now, you've written books on Ronald Reagan and are now finishing a major work on Ronald Reagan's role in his administration's effort to undermine the Soviet Union. Now, Newsmax's editor and CEO Christopher Ruddy recently interviewed former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev in Moscow, who urged Washington to put aside partisan differences to ratify START, or the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. President Reagan's son, Michael, said his father would never approve of START. What is your take?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I always hesitate to say what would have been Reagan's particular position on this or that. But since you mentioned Gorbachev and Chris Ruddy's interview with Gorbachev. How about this? Ronald Reagan's favorite aphorism or credo or maxim for dealing with the Soviets was "Doverai, no proverai," which was Russian for trust but verify. And I've got on my desk right here a picture. It was in Soviet life of Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev next to each other, December 8th, 1987, at the Washington Summit, where they signed the INF Treaty, which to this day stands as the greatest real true nuclear missile reduction treaty in history. They actually eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons in that treaty. It's a great treaty, and even as they were doing that, Reagan, as he's signing the document, says those words, "Doverai, no proverai, trust but verify." And Gorbachev kind of giggles and says, "I knew you would say that." And Reagan said, "Yes, I always say that." But that right there is a kind of a statement, another way of saying, don't be duped. Continue peace through strength. You get peace only when you're strong. And so, don't let the Russians today, who have a prime minister who is a former KGB member, Vladimir Putin, don't let them dupe us today the way that they duped us in the 1970s when the likes of Leonid Brezhnev and Jimmy Carter embraced and kissed at the Vienna summit in June 1979, just 6 months before the Soviets invaded Afghanistan.
Professor, last question real quickly. Looking at the long, short list of the possible GOP candidates considering a presidential bid in 2012, who do you think is doing the best job of carrying the Reagan mantle?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, that's, in fact, I would say that Obama's biggest advantage is the lack of unity for the GOP on a 2012 candidate. I've always been very impressed with Newt Gingrich. He's very articulate. I don't know if he could win the presidency. Very articulate. I think Sarah Palin has the courage that the vast majority of the people in our party lack. And the fact that the left hates her so much shows how right she often is. In fact, the left hated Reagan as well, and you couldn't have had a nicer person, nicer guy, better American, an all-around good person as you could in Reagan. So, but I don't know who it'll be in 2012. Republicans have got to get united around that, because that right now is Obama's greatest advantage.
All right, the book is called Dupes. Professor Paul Kengor, thanks so much for joining us. If folks want to find out more about your book, where can they go?
Well, there's a website called thedupesbook.com, and if you go there, you could see all kinds of past articles, interviews, and even some of the documents that I found in Soviet archives.
All right. Paul Kengor, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, Kathleen.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.